Okay. So let's go over Visual Studio. Okay. So there, I want you to use the instructions for this pretty much when you get down to here. Okay. Starting on page 3. Page 1 and 2 are going to be a little bit different. And we're going to walk through that right now. So again, it's you still go to Visual Studio Microsoft.com. Okay. So we're going to bring up that that page right now. Yeah. Okay. And you could go to free Visual Studio or you can just go way down here. And what we're going to do is we're going to download Visual Studio, the community version. Okay. And so you just click on that. And what happens is it's going to download an exe to your download file folder. Okay. So if I go and look at my download folder, and you'll see this executable. Okay. What you want to do is you want to right click on it and run it as an administrator. Now, I'm not going to run it here because it will just poop out because I can't load anything onto these computers. Okay. But you're going to run Visual Studio as an administrator. Okay. And it's going to load, it's going to download, it's going to run Visual Studio 10.0. I mean, 2026.NET 10.0. Okay. And that's all you need to do. And then as it goes through its setup, then you're going to come back to here. You're going to really start on page 3. And, yeah, so you're going to start right here. Okay. And the only thing you need to really load from Visual Studio, there's a lot of stuff you can load. You're going to just need this ASP.NET and web development. Okay. Because this is really ASP.NET. Now, ASP.NET, you're allowed to use one of 2 languages, C#, which we will be using, or Visual Basic.NET. And actually, when I worked at Wayne State School of Medicine, we used Visual Basic instead of C#. Okay. But they both kind of work the same. God bless you. Okay, and just kind of follow this all the ways through. You don't need any of this. This will, of course, say Visual Studio 2026 for your home computer. It'll run through that, and it'll say Visual Studio Community 2026. Okay. And again, you never really have to sign in. One of the problems I have with Visual Studio 2026 is you only get 2 options. With Visual Studio 2022, you get 4 options right here. I don't like the dark option, okay? I always choose the blue one, but that's up to you. And then you'll be all set and ready to rock and roll. Okay. So that's how you load Visual Studio. And this is definitely one of your assignments before next week. Okay. All right. If you have any problems, let me know. shoot me an email. All right. All right. So make sure you get that loaded. All right. Seems like we're not going to have any Apple issues. What you're going to notice is um, your top two sections of Moodle are going to be first for your lab tests, which I don't think you can see. Okay. At least you should be able to see it. Let me see. Yeah, you should be able to see it. You don't know how many tests I have made. So, anyways, and then you're going to come to your assignment section. And the first your first assignment is going to be this NA assignment. What's that mean? Never attending assignment. And I really wanted you to get this done by, be, you know, by midnight next week. Okay. I'll let you turn it in late. I have no problem with that. I probably won't even take off the remaining points. I do have a video that I made about doing that assignment. I really want to make sure you can use your environment. Okay. All right. So these are the top two assignments. I mean, sections, your tests and your assignments. All right. And then we go into our individual weeks. And we are currently in week 1. Uh, Usually I'll put the meetings up here. Um, you know, this is about doing the labs. I'll have to take a look at this video. I might redo this video. Um, but I'm hoping we can get that far today. All right. And then every section you'll have your lecture notes. So we'll have chapter 1 lecture notes. Okay. And um, this is really the notes for the class. All right. And we'll go through this one today. Yeah, and we're going to need to load a few things today, so we're going to go through that as well. So let's start with our lecture notes. So bring up your chapter 1 lecture notes. So you've all programmed before, and this is a very simple program. Let's say we wanted to receive 2 input numbers, and we wanted the capability of adding them or multiplying them. Okay. And you're all probably very familiar with procedural language. What's a procedural language? It goes from the top to the bottom. Okay. Um, there's loops, there's if thens, but pretty much it goes from the top to the bottom. Well, C#'s not like that. Okay. C# is something called event driven language. Okay. It responds to events that you do on your user interface. Okay. So you'll have really 2 sections of code. You'll have what the user sees and what happens behind the scenes. Okay. And what the user sees when they click a button, it executes code. And there's other events that can cause code to execute. For example, a, a field changes on your form. that can cause code to execute. Loading your form causes code to execute, can cause code to execute. Leaving your form can cause code to execute. Okay, so it's based off of events that your user interface has you doing. Okay. How many people have heard of object-oriented programming? How many people are experts in object-oriented programming? Pretty good? Okay. Well, this is all object-oriented programming. Now, before I scare you and you start running out the door and say, no, I can't do this, let me just say this. You won't even notice it for the first 8 weeks. Okay. But this is definitely object-oriented programming. Okay. And we'll talk more and more about that as we get in our latter weeks of the semester. Okay. But basically, and this is probably the last time I'll talk about this for like the next 8 weeks. Object-oriented programming is basically based off of objects. For example, in our example, let's say we want to create a calculator. A calculator is an object. The class calculator is a way of describing. I just noticed they can't see my hands on there. It's a way of describing an object. Okay. In this case, a calculator object. It is not real yet. It's just, this is just the definition of the calculator class. And every class has two things. It has properties and it has methods. Now, properties are basically variables. Okay, but these variables go directly, they are directly affected by the calculator class. And the other thing is methods. Methods are actions. And since you all had Python, they're basically functions. They're functions for the calculator. Okay, and in this case, so we've got three properties. Okay, number one, number two, and result. And we got two methods. We have an add method and we have a multiply method. And you all know that when it says void, that means it's not going to return a value. Okay. So methods are functions, properties are variables. How's that? I just told you everything you need to know about object-oriented programming. Well, at least for the first several weeks. All right. So don't get stuck on this yet. Just wanted to point that out. So if we were to write a program and include this class in our program, so you would actually have this code in your program. Now, this code can either be in your main program or it could be included into your program. And we'll talk about that 8 or 9 weeks from now. Okay. But this code is part of the program. And when you have that code part of the program, you can do stuff like you can create an instance of the calculator using the calculator definition, and this is the syntax for that. We actually say this is creating an instance. Has anybody heard that word? Okay. So we're creating an instance and we're going to call the object calc. And once we create that, then we can use all the properties and methods within that class. So we can assign a value to number one, which is a property, assign a value to number two, which is a property, and then we can do one of the actions or functions of that class. Okay. And if you create a program to do that and you had this code and all this code, it would work. And I answer some of the questions for you. So, of course, line number one creates the instance. If we wanted to create a separate instance, we could call this like Calc 2. And then we would have both Calc 1 and or Calc and Calc 2 available. So yeah, again, object created using a class, really a class definition is an instance, and we use a dot notation to do that. So, right here, calc dot number one. If we had the other instance created, we do calc 2 dot number one as well. All right. So, and these are the properties and the methods. You don't have to worry about this for a while, but this is the type of programming we are going to be doing. All right. There's three things that every object-oriented language needs to do, and I can't always remember, but we'll talk about it later. All right. A Visual Studio project. Okay. So what we're going to do in this class is we're going to create computer programming programs using Microsoft Windows, websites, web applications, web services, and we're going to create projects. Every project is part of a solution. Okay. In our case, it will be a one-to-one relationship. Every project we create will have, every solution we create will only have one project, but you could, in theory, have multiple projects in a solution. Okay. I guess they wanted to initially call this language cool, but I guess the word was already trademarked. And again, for the most part, you have to run these programs on a Windows platform. All right. They are not highly transportable to other operating systems. And since 93% of the world uses Windows anyways, they'll work pretty much on anybody's computer. I'll tell you a quick story. So I was working down at the Detroit Medical Center. We were the small computer part of the, I forget what, IT. And so we had these two companies come in that wanted to, because we used to use DOS. Okay. I know y'all have never heard of it, but okay. Phil has. Well, good. Thank you. So they wanted to sell us these GUI platforms. And so we had two that were competing. IBM had theirs, I forget, what was theirs called? IBM brought their GUI in, and Windows brought their GUI in. IBM had 12,000 installations. Microsoft had 8 million. So guess what one we went with? We went with Windows. And so did the rest of the world. Okay. So anyways, so Most of our programs are going to be C sharp, because obviously is a C sharp class. The platform is going to be Windows, and the project type almost exclusively will be desktop. We may write one or two console programs, but for the most part, we're going to be part of our desktop. Okay. As far as the .NET, now the .NET is this middle part that every um, .NET application uses. Okay, and it really doesn't matter what language you're writing it in. It uses that .NET for that middle part, the core of your programming. Um, we're always going to use .NET Core. Okay, so don't ever use framework. Okay, only you're going to use .NET 8.0 or .NET 10.0. Okay, and I'll show you how to change that if you ever get an error. All right, so we're going to use uh, we're not using framework. Um, and again, these are just different ways to run a program. Um, we're not using this. We're going to use this. Okay. All right. Now, maybe this is a little bit overwhelming for you, but we're going to walk through some stuff right now. Okay. And I kind of want you to follow along. Okay. In other words, I want you to do this. You can do this on your personal computer or here or both. All right. Obviously, I'm going to do it here. Okay. So, so the first thing that we need to do is I want you to set up a structure. And again, this is for here and for home. By default, Visual Studio is going to try to put everything here. It's always going to try to put it under source repulse. Okay. What I'm going to suggest is that you put it on your document folder, under your document folder. All right. All right. So first thing you need to do is click here in CIS 130 student folder structure. And this is going to download a zip file. Okay. And we're going to extract that zip file. So go ahead and click on here. And you should get that zip file. Okay. All right. And it should be in your downloads folder. And there's mine. Okay. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to move it from your downloads file into your documents file. Okay. Now, your document file, and I'm going to delete the one I created earlier today. All right. So, if you're working locally, and I'll show you this, I want you to copy this over to here, to your document file. We're going to replace, in my case, I'm going to replace the final thing in here. Okay. Now, just to show you here, if you're actually doing work from here, this is actually the same folder as your H drive. Okay. So if I go and I look at my H drive, and every one of you should have one of these. Okay. Here's my H drive. If I look at my H drive, it'll be exactly the same as here. So if I did date modified here, date modified here, you'll see they're exactly the same. Okay. So your documents folder on your computer here is always going to be your H drive. All right. All right. Now what we need to do is we need to unzip or extract what's in this zip drive. But there's something you got to do first. And you always, always, always have to do this. Okay. You have to right click on here, go to properties, and unblock. You can just say okay. You always have to do that. Now you got to make sure the right properties things come up. Sometimes it gets a little bit weird, but yeah, sometimes if you don't exactly hit it, it won't be the properties. They'll be the properties for the whole folder. Okay. But right click on it first, then right click. Whoop. There we go. When you get the long list properties, and you can see it'll say unblock, and you just click on that. And since I've already unblocked it, it's good. The next thing you need to do is extract this zip file. How do you do that? Right click on it again, do extract all, and this screen will come up. What I suggest is get rid of the last folder, because the last folder actually takes on the name of the file name. Okay, so I always get rid of it first, like that, and I do that. And I'm going to show you why. Okay, so right here, see, it created that folder name for me anyways. If I don't do that, watch what happens. Somewhere down here, if I don't get rid of that folder, whoops, wanted to extract. So if I just leave it there, it's kind of redundant. And I'll show you why. Okay. So if I go to documents, it will actually create a second folder that's called the same thing. So we don't need that. All right. So I'm going to delete this folder because I don't want it. Now, what you're going to notice here is that under CIS 130 student, you're going to have assignments area, you're going to have a lecture area, you're going to have a practice area, and a test area. Okay. So, and this is the only time we really need to do this. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to leave that up, and you're going to have lecture files for each chapter. Okay. And these are programs that have already been written and stuff like that. Okay. So we're going to click on that. And once again, it should be in my downloads area. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that. I'm going to move it over to lecture. Okay. So I'm going to cut it out of here. Cut and paste. All right. Now, again, it's the same thing. You have to right click on this change the properties to on block because it doesn't want you putting a virus on your computer. And then we're going to do extract all. And again, like I've suggested, get rid of this and it'll create that folder for you anyway. Okay. So I can get rid of that too. But so anyways, if we double click on here, we're going to have two different solutions we're going to work with tonight. Well, actually, we're going to work with one. All right. So let's go back to our handout to here. And so, you can make a shortcut if you wanted to. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to click open the project or the solution. Okay. And since in this class we're going to only have one project per solution, we can open up either the project or the solution. Okay. So we're going to go into financial calculations, and here's the solution. A lot of times the solution can be right in here. Sometimes you put it outside the folder. It doesn't really matter. So let's go inside, and then if we want to just open up the project, we would double click right here, the CIS project. And since we're here, we'll just double click this. And for the first time on this computer, you're going to use Microsoft Visual Studio 2022. If you're at home, it might be Visual Studio 2026. Am I talking too much? You can say yes. And again, you don't have to sign in, just skip this for now. I like this one, so you can choose whatever you want. Okay, and it's bringing up that whole project for us. And for me, it's bringing it up on my opposite screen, and I'll drag that over. All right. So sometimes they'll bring up this what's new if it's the first time it's been run. I don't care. Okay. But what I want you to do is look at this Solution Explorer. And this pretty much shows you all the files, except there's some hidden files that you sometimes don't see. Okay. So that's important. But it brings up all this file and it really replicates what's here. Okay. Usually, if you're going to copy from one area to another, let's say you want to move your financial calculations project to another area, do it through Windows, not through Visual Studio, because you could mess things up. Okay. But for the most part, it's the same. Now, one of the things I like to do is I like my environment to be the same. So what I do is I'll bring up my properties window and I'll show you what that has to do. Okay. And it usually puts it right under the Solutions Explorer. The other thing I like to bring up are my tools. Okay. And my toolbox. And you don't go under tools. Seems like that's where you would go. You go under your view and you go to toolbox. And I like to pin it. All right, so it doesn't move around. And this is what my environment always looks like. Okay. And I've found this to be very, very helpful. Let me tell you guys something. The less your brain has to think, the better. Okay. So if you keep stuff in the same spot, your brain's not working as hard. It can concentrate on other things. That makes sense?
Sorry, where did you get that toolbox from? Within tools?
You go to view.
Oh, view.
Yeah. View, and it's in the middle.
I see it.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to our lecture notes. And so you see these different forms, and um, every C program looks for um, the main function to run. Did you know that? So yeah. So in our case, we have three different forms, and again, we use a technique of naming our stuff according to what type of object it is. So we named our forms FRM. Okay. Uh, and this seems to be very helpful as we do it. All right. But let's go ahead and bring up the main form. So double click on the main form. And what it's doing right now is it's creating a GUI for you. Okay. Now, this GUI is represented behind the scenes by code. Okay. So, for example, we have two buttons here called calculate investment and calculate whatever. Okay. If I click on here, you can see what the name is. You can either list all your properties for that form or for that button by category or by alphabetically. I like alphabetically. So, for example, but the only thing that's not alphabetical is the name of it. So the name of this is BTN investment. Okay. The name for this control from the toolbox is BTN depreciation. The actual name of this is a text property. Okay. And just to prove that this is a text property, watch this. You see that? That's how easy it was to change the name, the label of that button. Okay. Now, all this is represented by code in right here. You say, teacher, that's not that much code. Well, we got to expand it. And you'll see code for the exit button. There's a panel in there. There's your depreciation button. And all these things. So let me explain what's happening here. So the button name is BTN depreciation. It is using the button class to describe it. And that button class contains certain properties like location, where's it going to be on the screen, the margins, the size, um, what the tab index is, and other things. If we change the color of it from the default color, for example, let's say we wanted to make that button blue. Okay. Okay. So I go back to my design and let's say I want to make this blue. So I think it's 4-color. Let's see what this is. Let's make it this color. Okay, I guess it does the text. But now if we go to the code behind that, which is right here, we're going to see that it changed the 4-color right here. Okay. So what does this mean? It means your life is easy. You don't have to write all this code. You don't have to describe the button class. It's all done for you. But you can see that we are object-oriented programming with this. These are all properties. Okay. Now, there's one thing that's not a property, and that's this click. This is actually going to be a method for this object. Okay. Now, let me tell you something else that's great. For the most part, you never have to go here. You don't have to program here at all, for the most part. Okay? But if I wanted to look at this method, this is in another part of the program called the code behind page. Okay? So we can close this down. We really don't need to use it. Okay? We go here and we can just leave this open and we do a view code. God bless you. And this is the method for a click event. So whenever that button's clicked, this method is going to run for depreciation. And basically it's opening up another form. Okay? In this case. But you could do a lot of things. This, my friends, is where you're going to do most of your programming. Okay? Is in these code behind pages. The other thing you're going to do in this class is you're going to design these forms. Okay? And watch how easy it is to design these forms. So let's say I want to look at all, because I'm working with a Windows form. Let's say I wanted to add another button. Okay? So basically what I do, I take this control, it's really an object, but I take this control and I just drag it onto my form. Okay? I've just created another object on my form. And let's say I want to name it the Brett button. So again, following standards, I call it BTN for button, and I type in Brett, and it's going to change that name. And let's say I want to call it, change the text to Brett. And you can use your own name if you like. There it is. And just by doing those 3 or 4 easy steps, let's look at the code I wrote. Okay. Again, I'm going to bring up this designer.cs. Okay. Let's see what it did. Well, it's initializing it right there. And this should be at the bottom. There it is. It wrote all that code for me. Don't you like coding like this? So this is meant to make life easy for you. All right. All right. I'm going to close this down. Yes, I could change stuff here. Okay. If I wanted to. Okay. I could change this to that. But ideally, that's not the way you want to do it. Okay. Ideally, you do it in your GUI part of programming. All right. Because if you make a mistake in your code behind page, this part doesn't come up. All right. All right. Let's go back to our note. Did I say I would get you guys out of here early? Yeah. Again, you don't need to know all this. Um, so, you know, but this tells when you do application.run in your main thing, it's going to tell it to run this form first. Okay. Um, again, mess around with this. Um, and I showed you how I like my environment. Okay. 11, let's take a look at that. Sometimes you know, let's say you want to show all your hidden files, then you can click this icon right here. Okay, it's a toggle switch. And in our case, it shows all the bins, the objects, which we really don't usually care about. Okay. All right. So I brought the calculation. That's the hard part. All right. Um, all right. Let's see. Yeah. So you see how all this works. We talked about viewing the code. Oh, by the way, there's another way to view the code. Let's say I want to view the code for the Brett button. Okay. I can double click here. And since we haven't put anything in there, that's fine. And we could do something like this. Let's say we wanted we could do something like this. Okay. If Let's, let's go ahead and try running this. And this is how you run a program. Uh-oh, I got an error. Let's do this. This wasn't planned, so I'm just trying to. All right. So, and we're going to go through this again about how to run a program, but just to show you, you could actually make your own code here. So every time I click on this, it's going to either enable it or disable it. Uh-oh, I have a problem. And I do have to make this an else. Okay. Um, let's try that. Stop the program, try running it. Oh, my bad. My bad. Anyways, you get the idea. I'd have to look up the syntax for that. All right. Well, right now, what we're going to do is we're going to comment it out. Okay. All right. Let's go back to our handout. Whoop. All right. So this is kind of the structure we created. And again, it's going to be very helpful for you to keep up this structure, both at your home computer and here. Okay. Um, I will tell you a nightmare story that I've happened several times. Several times to this one guy. When he would create his test here, it would go to the default area and we couldn't get to it. So he would compress or zip his zip his program, and the program would have nothing in it. And so I couldn't even grade his test. So we went through this a couple different times, and it's because he wasn't putting it into the under his documents. Okay.
So it was never extracting it.
Well, what happened, I think, is it put it under where Visual Studio wants to do it. And Visual Studio wants to put it under where that application is loaded under source repos. And guess what gets wiped out every time on these computers?
C drive.
So make sure you put it under your documents. All right. Um, yeah. Again, this is just saying use File Explorer if you want to move stuff. Um, and all your work is going to be submitted by zipping your code. Okay. So, for example, let's say I wanted you wrote a program called financial calculations. Okay. You actually go to the folder where it is. I don't need the solution file. You can, um, but I need you to zip this. So you would do compress to a zip file. Okay. And this is going to get everything underneath it. That's really what I need. All right. Namespace, what your application likes to do is it likes to name everything after um, one namespace. Okay. If we go in our program here, what we'll see in every parts of this is we're going to see namespace financial calculation. This is more just for organizing. It's not really a class or anything. Um, namespace is just a way of keeping everything organized. Okay, and you're going to see that in everything. All the programs for this. See namespace right here. So namespace actually organizes all your classes into one area. Okay. All right. So typically, when we execute a program, which we did, um, it's going to put everything under the names. It's going to use the namespace name, and then it's going to create a .exe, a .dll, and some other files for you. Um, using, okay? Using is kind of a way of including code into your program, okay? And so in this case, we're including code to write with Windows forms, okay? So all the code that Microsoft has developed for you is in there, okay? So you don't need to know what's in there. You just are going to use the classes like button. Okay, there'll be a button class in systems windows.form, and you're going to use that class to create a new button. Okay. Um, so again, to run the application, so let me just show you a few things here. Now, because I've already run this, we have all that, right? But I'm going to delete it. Okay, and this is the way it starts off when you first run a before you, as you're developing your program and you haven't started it. Now, if we run this program, okay, this is actually running right now. Okay, and see how it repopulated all this, and you could tell the date and time. Okay, all right. And if we ran it, we could put these numbers in and all that. Okay, I'll let you do that. And you saw how it created all these files. Okay. In our case, it's under the .NET that we're using. We're using .NET 8.0. Okay. All right. This is where I'll stop tonight. I'm going to stop our recording.